Hello, my name's Cecilia. My mom stole the business I built from scratch and handed it to my sister's husband like it was a holiday pie. She looked me in the eye and said, "It's ours now." They changed the locks, erased my name, called me unstable, dramatic, ungrateful. But what hurts more than the theft was how normal they made it feel. Like I was never meant to have it in the first place. Have you ever been slowly written out of your own story by the people who should have protected it? Because that's what happened to me. And the worst part? They did it with a smile. When I pulled up to the shop that morning, the street was still quiet. Most of the downtown stores weren't open yet, and for years I loved being the first one there, sliding the key into the lock while the air still smelled of fresh bread from the bakery across the corner. But that morning, the key refused to turn. I tried again, wiggling it the way I always did when the door stuck. Nothing. I pressed my forehead against the glass, cupping my hands to block the glare. Shelves were stocked, lights humming inside. A man I didn't recognize, wearing a black security jacket, stood near the counter. He looked right at me, then shook his head slowly, like he already knew who I was. "Can you open the door?" I called out. He stepped closer and pushed the glass door open just enough to speak. "You're not authorized to enter." The words made no sense. "Excuse me? This is my store." Behind him I saw Dorian, my sister's husband, standing at the register like it was the most natural thing in the world. He was giving directions to the employees as if he had always been the boss. My chest tightened. "I don't know what you've been told," I said firmly, trying to hold my voice steady, "but you need to move aside. This is my business." The guard shook his head again. "Your badge doesn't work. You're not on the list." My phone buzzed in my hand. I opened my email, and just like that, my access to the store systems was gone. No schedule, no staff messages, no inventory dashboard. My name had been scrubbed from everything overnight. For a moment, I couldn't feel the ground under my feet. I wasn't angry yet, just disoriented, like the world had slipped into some other version of reality. A woman I'd hired months ago to manage the back office walked by the front window. Our eyes met. She looked down and kept walking. I turned away, walked back to my car, and sat there with my hands gripping the steering wheel. I tried to swallow, but the air itself felt too heavy. I thought about the first time I signed that lease, how proud I was to finally see my name on the dotted line. No investors, no family help, just me and the small savings my father left behind before he passed. I spent nights painting walls, arranging shelves, eating cold sandwiches because there was no time to cook. I remembered Vera laughing when I told her about my plan. "You'll burn yourself out, a woman trying to run a business by herself, without a husband? You'll regret it." And my mother, Isolda, saying almost the same thing, just with a softer knife. "You're wasting your youth. A man should be the one carrying this weight, not you." But I kept going. I opened the doors. Customers came in. Slowly, the place had become something real. Now, as I sat in my car staring at the locked door, all I could think was how quickly years of sweat could be erased in one morning. I drove straight to the city clerk's office. My hands were still shaking when I slid the papers across the counter and asked for a copy of my business license. The woman behind the desk tapped her keyboard, then looked at me like she was studying a stranger. "It shows here the license was updated 4 weeks ago," she said matter-of-factly. "Current owner, Dorian Haynes." "That's impossible," I snapped. "Check again." She printed out the form. I saw my name, crossed out, and below it, my own signature authorizing the transfer. I stared at the page. "This isn't real. I never signed this." The clerk shrugged. "It's filed. It's legal." I wanted to scream, but instead, I folded the paper in half and slid it into my bag. I could feel the clerk's eyes on me, not sympathetic, just annoyed, like I was another person making noise about a problem that wasn't hers. That night, I drove to my mother's house. Vera's car was in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see them, Vera and Dorian, sitting with glasses of wine, relaxed, laughing. When I stepped into the living room, the laughter died. "Why?" My voice cracked even though I tried to sound strong. "Why is my store under Dorian's name? Why is my key useless? Why am I being shut out of the business I built?" My mother didn't even let me finish. She lifted her chin, calm and almost bored. It's not just your store. It's ours now. Family first. Family? I almost choked on the word. Family doesn't steal from each other. Vera smirked and tilted her glass. You've been unstable, Cecilia. Always running around, chasing one idea after another. Dorian can manage better. He brings stability. Those words stung worse than if she had shouted. My own mother siding with her, not hesitating for a second. I looked at my sister. You could have come to me. You could have asked. Instead, you erased me. Vera leaned back, lips curling into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. You were never really in control. We just let you think you were. My mother added softly, as though explaining to a child, It's better this way. You'll see, in time. I couldn't stay another second. I walked out before the tears betrayed me. In the car, under the dim streetlight, I finally let them fall. Not loud sobs, just quiet streams running down my face, a silence heavier than shouting could ever be. By the time I reached my apartment, the tears had dried. I pulled out the old ledger from my storage locker, the one I used when I first tracked every penny spent, every item bought. My handwriting filled those pages, proof of how it all began. I whispered into the empty room. I built that place with my hands, but they never saw my hands, only the absence of a ring on my finger. I set the ledger on the desk, pulled a yellow legal pad toward me, and wrote one line in dark ink. They erased me on paper. Let's see how they hold up in the dark. She didn't even blink when I asked if she knew what they did, like I was the one stirring trouble. That expression, flat and unbothered, stayed with me all night. By morning, I was staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every word, until the sun pushed me out of bed. My mind drifted backward as I dressed, almost against my will, to the first weeks of the store. I could still see myself barefoot, rolling paint across the windows before the first frost. I remember holding the first delivery box, my arms sore, back aching, yet my chest warm with pride. I signed every receipt with my full name, Cecilia Cross, and handed them to customers as though I was giving away a piece of myself. Even the dust back then seemed to belong to me. That memory faded quickly when I walked past the storefront now. A new banner stretched across the glass, bold and smug. Langford Family Market, EST, 2022. My name was nowhere in sight. Instead, Vera stood in front with a local food influencer, both holding matching cups stamped with her face. The camera lights reflected on the glass I once cleaned myself. I froze on the sidewalk, not sure if I should step closer or keep walking. Against my better judgment, I tried the door anyway. The same security guard from before blocked me with one hand. You again, he muttered, firm but not cruel. You can't go in. My eyes caught something by the garbage bin. A trash bag split open, and out of it spilled my old apron, the one with the faded logo I'd stitched in late at night when I couldn't afford to order custom uniforms. To anyone else, it was trash. To me, it was the proof of every exhausted evening I'd given to that place. A familiar voice startled me. Mrs. Hayes, one of my earliest customers, had stopped with a bag of groceries in her hand. Oh, honey, did you leave the company? Her tone was gentle, but the words sliced through me like glass. I forced a smile, nodded once, and kept walking. By the time I reached my car, my throat was tight. I sank into the driver's seat and sat there motionless. 45 minutes must have passed while I gripped the steering wheel, staring at nothing. In that silence, memories crowded me. Nights spent on a cot in the stockroom because it wasn't worth the drive home. Evenings when I packed handmade teas by hand because we couldn't afford suppliers yet. The laughter of customers when I told them my store would survive, even when my family said it wouldn't. I pulled out my phone, needing a distraction, and the headline nearly made me drop it. Vera Langford's Vision, Building a Legacy for the Family. The article was long, polished, filled with flattering photos of Vera and Dorian smiling like royalty. My name didn't appear once, not even in passing. The sickening part was a quote from my mother. Vera always had the business instinct. It was clear from the start. I shut the phone off before my hands betrayed me and hurled it against the dashboard. The weight in my chest shifted from grief to a simmering anger I couldn't shake. Later that afternoon, I opened Instagram. My hands trembled as I typed a short story. Not everything claimed is earned. It was all I wrote. I didn't tag anyone, didn't name the store. But within hours, Vera posted her own video, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. She sat next to Dorian, sipping from a branded mug, saying, "Haters gonna hate. We stay building." The comments under her post were full of praise. No one asked where I was. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my mother. "Please don't stir things up. This is family. Don't make it worse than it is." Worse? I whispered the word out loud, stunned at how lightly she dismissed the theft of my life's work. By the weekend, I convinced myself to show up at her house for dinner. Maybe, just maybe, I could face them directly. I arrived on time, walked into the dining room, and sat down at the table. No one greeted me, not even a nod. Dorian poured glasses of wine for everyone, his hand steady, his smile polite. When he reached my seat, he passed me by as though I wasn't there. Vera's voice broke the silence. "Oh, I didn't know you'd be here. Thought you were busy. Not working anymore." The laughter that followed from the others at the table felt like a knife slipped under my ribs. I looked around. My mother busied herself with her napkin, never meeting my eyes. I stood slowly, my chair scraping the hardwood. I didn't shout, didn't throw the glass that sat untouched in front of me. I simply walked out, the air thick with the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Outside, I stood in the yard, the porch light flickering weakly above. The night air was cool, but inside I burned with something colder than rage. They hadn't only taken my store. They made sure the only version of me left was the one they could ignore. They hadn't just pushed me out of the room that night. They had made sure my absence would be permanent, etched into the way they looked through me as though I'd been air. By the time I got back to my apartment, I knew grief wouldn't be enough anymore. I needed facts, paper, something solid that couldn't be twisted into family gossip or spun on Vera's social media. The next morning, I drove across town to the storage unit I'd kept since opening the shop. The padlock was stiff, cold from the night air, but it clicked open. The smell hit me first: dust, old cardboard, faint lemon polish from the shelving I used to keep there. I pulled open the door and started dragging out boxes. Each one was labeled in my handwriting. Inventory logs, 2021, vendor contracts, financial docs. It wasn't grief work anymore, it was excavation. I set up a folding chair, ripped open the first box, and began sorting. Hours slipped past while I sifted through receipts, early contracts, and vendor agreements. The more I touched those papers, the steadier I felt. These were mine. I built this place once, and the evidence sat in black ink and worn staples. At the bottom of a folder marked legal, I found something that made my stomach clench. It was a photocopy of a form. Transfer of ownership consent form. My name was on the line, my signature, my handwriting, scrawled across the bottom. The date read 6 months ago. I pressed my fingers against the paper, forcing myself to breathe. 6 months ago. That was when Vera had stopped by, saying she needed me to sign a vendor update form. I was rushing to a meeting with suppliers, not paying close attention. I had signed without question. I stared at the page. The strokes were mine, but the consent wasn't. They had folded my trust into their scheme, slipped it beneath my nose, and turned it into the knife that cut me out. I dialed the county clerk's office right there in the unit. My voice stayed flat, detached. "Can you confirm the business license transfer date for Rootrise?" The woman on the line pulled the file. "Yes, ma'am. Legally filed, signed by you. Everything looks in order." "In order," I repeated, staring at my own betrayal in ink. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat motionless for several minutes, the paper trembling in my hands. That was the gut punch, realizing I had enabled my own erasure. As I sat there, another set of memories slid in like an unwelcome slideshow. Times when Vera had borrowed ideas and later announced them as hers at family dinners. Mom always smoothed it over with a phrase, She just knows how to present better, that's all. And Dorian, smiling too much whenever my sales numbers came up in conversation, his compliments laced with something I couldn't name back then. The pattern wasn't new, it had been choreographed for years. I had just been too busy building to see who was waiting to claim the credit. I shoved aside another pile of paperwork and uncovered a small box I didn't recognize. Inside was a sealed envelope. My breath caught when I saw the handwriting. It was my father's. He had written it months before he died. With shaking fingers, I opened it. A key fell into my lap. The letter was short, scrawled in his familiar, uneven script. "You're the only one in this family who builds instead of borrows. This place was always yours." Tears blurred the words, but my grip on the key was steady. I knew where it fit. I drove home and pulled out the desk I'd kept since college. The bottom drawer had a small lock I'd never bothered with because I lost the key years ago. Now, with one click, it opened. Inside lay the original deed to my first pop-up stand, signed in my name alone. It wasn't much in monetary value, but in meaning, it was everything. Proof my father had trusted me, proof that I wasn't invisible, proof that even if the louder voices tried to write me out, someone had believed in me all along. I sat on the floor, deed in one hand, letter in the other. The despair that had followed me for weeks shifted. I wasn't erased, not entirely. They had buried me under noise, but the foundation was still mine. That night, I pulled out my laptop. No more sitting in the dark, waiting for another headline with Vera's face on it. No more silent car rides. One by one, I scanned every document, contracts, receipts, the forged consent form. I uploaded them to a secure legal folder. The rhythm of the scanner became almost soothing, each page a brick in the case I was building. When the files were in order, I opened a new document and typed the name across the top. Case 001, Cross v. Langford.pdf. I leaned back, staring at the screen. They had built their case with smoke and mirrors, all charm and presentation. Mine would be built from receipts, from dates, from ink that couldn't be sweet-talked away. I whispered to the empty room. They built a case of smoke and mirrors. I build mine from receipts. The screen glowed in front of me long after midnight. The folder I'd built, stacked with receipts, contracts, my father's letter, was sitting in neat order, locked into a case file. I should have felt comforted, but all I felt was a hard thrum in my chest. It wasn't grief anymore, it was fuel. 2 days later, I got a message from an acquaintance I knew through the Small Business Association. "Come to the chamber event downtown," she wrote. "Networking night, big crowd, you should be there." I needed fresh air, so I went. I didn't know until I walked through those glass doors what was waiting for me. The ballroom was filled with booths, banners, tables covered in white cloth. My stomach turned when I saw the largest banner stretched across the far wall. Langford Family Market, a local legacy. It was my design. The colors were softened, the font tweaked, but the pattern of leaves curling along the edges was mine. The product names, they hadn't even bothered to change those. Every word was familiar, but my name had been erased, scrubbed until there was no trace I had ever existed. I stood frozen, people brushing past me with drinks in their hands. A man turned and smiled politely. "Oh, you're Vera's sister, right?" Just like that, I was introduced to my own work as though I were a distant relative, a guest in a story that used to be mine. Heat rose in my neck, but I swallowed it down and forced a small nod. On stage, Vera took the microphone, her hair styled perfectly, her outfit polished to look effortless. Dorian stood behind her, the picture of pride. My mother, Isolde, was in the front row, hands clasped like she was watching her daughter receive a medal. "Our family has always been about hard work," Isolde said when she was handed the mic, "and Vera, she's inherited that spirit." The applause was loud, cheerful. I waited for a single mention of my name. Nothing. Not even a pause in my direction. The silence was more brutal than any insult. After the speeches, I wandered to the side where a longtime customer, Mr. Whitman, caught my arm. He looked at me with confusion. "I came because of you. But you're not even on the site anymore. Did you leave? I forced myself to check their new website on my phone. My photo, the blog posts I'd written, the words I had poured into every page, they were gone, deleted like they'd never existed. A week later, a letter came in the mail. The handwriting was shaky but firm. It was from Mr. Whitman. They can sell your shelves, but not your spirit. You were the reason I kept coming back. I held that letter longer than I care to admit, tracing each word with my fingertip. It was proof that I hadn't imagined all those years, that someone saw me before they tried to make me vanish. That night, I opened my laptop again, not to scan evidence this time, but to write. The words spilled out onto a blank page. What they took, and what they couldn't touch. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. I published it anonymously on Medium, outlining the theft, the silence, the way family can turn legacy into a weapon. By morning, the article was circulating among local business groups. Other women in the community began sharing it, adding their own stories of being sidelined, of being told someone else should carry the credit. Vera, of course, responded online. A filtered video with her smiling just enough to look graceful. Some people can't stand watching others win. This time, the comments weren't all sweet. Whose recipes are those again? Funny how your sister disappeared. For the first time, the story didn't look flawless. That evening, I sat down at my desk and opened a new email. I typed out one line, steady and direct. I'm requesting full removal of all intellectual property I created within 14 days, or I'll proceed through legal counsel. I CC'd my mother, Vera, and Dorian. I hit send. The reply from my mother came quicker than I expected. You've always been dramatic, Cecilia. Don't embarrass us further. I typed back before my hands could shake. No, you did that all on your own. The words still glowed on my screen when I closed the laptop. No, you did that all on your own. For the first time in weeks, I felt a steadiness in my chest. It wasn't joy, not even relief, but a kind of clarity that burned cleaner than rage. If they wanted to make me invisible, then I would make myself undeniable, through the only language they couldn't twist, the law. 2 mornings later, I carried a canvas tote filled to the brim with folders, binders, and USB drives into an office I hadn't stepped into in years. Marcus Henley's name was still painted in gold on the door. Henley Associates, Legal Counsel. He had been one of my father's oldest friends, a man I'd seen at backyard barbecues and Christmas dinners when I was young. His hair had turned silver since the last time I'd seen him, but his handshake was as firm as ever. Cecilia, he said warmly, ushering me in. I wish this was under better circumstances. I set the tote down with a heavy thud. I need more than wishes. I need protection. Marcus adjusted his glasses, pulled out the letter I'd received from my mother, and read it in silence. His jaw flexed once before he spoke. You've got grounds, and you've got receipts. For the next 2 hours, I laid everything out on his desk. The forged consent form, the missing blog posts, the photos of Vera rebranding under my designs, the letter from a loyal customer, even screenshots of the cruel comments that followed when I dared to speak up online. Marcus flipped through each page, his expression steady, but I saw the fire in his eyes. We'll start with a cease and desist, he said finally. Intellectual property theft, fraudulent transfer of ownership, brand defamation. That's just the surface. If they don't comply, we escalate to civil litigation. And if they fight? I asked. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Then we make sure the fight happens in a courtroom, not in their kitchen. That was the first strategic move, and for once, the advantage was mine. By the end of the week, the official letter was drafted, signed, and sent. The backlash came faster than I expected. One evening, as I was brewing tea in my apartment, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my mother stood there, shoulders tight, eyes sharp. Cecilia, she began without pleasantries, you have to stop this nonsense. You're going to ruin your sister's reputation, drag our name through mud. Family doesn't do this. I stepped aside, let her in, and poured her a cup of chamomile, placing it gently on the table between us. It's not nonsense, Mother. It's legal fact. Her hand shook as she gripped the cup, then she set it down harder than she meant to, the tea sloshing over the rim. You think this is strength, but all you're doing is embarrassing us. Embarrassing you? I asked quietly. You did that the moment you erased me. She couldn't hold my gaze. With a sharp inhale, she stood, grabbed her coat, and left without another word. The door closed behind her, but the echo lingered. I didn't have time to mourn the conversation, because within days, people who had stayed silent for months began reaching out. A vendor I'd once worked with called unexpectedly. I left because I saw what they did to you, he confessed. I didn't want to be part of it. An email arrived from a small co-working space downtown. We've got a spot open for a pop-up table, free of charge. Take it for however long you need. Then a message from one of my old employees landed in my inbox. We didn't quit because of you. We quit because you weren't there anymore. Their words were small torches in the dark, proof I hadn't been forgotten. Twist by twist, the silence was breaking. Meanwhile, my anonymous article on Medium continued to circulate. A business columnist picked it up and connected the dots to Vera's brand. Soon, under every polished photo Vera posted, comments began to pile up. Where's the original founder? Funny how her sister disappeared. Who really built this business? Dorian tried to laugh it off in a video. Folks love drama. We're fine. We're building. But the comments weren't kind this time. Screenshots of my words, not everything claimed as earned, were pasted all over his post. The tide was shifting, not loudly, not violently, but enough to make the ground under them less certain. That night, I sat down at my desk once more and drafted a final email. The subject line was simple: final request before filing. I attached every document Marcus had prepared, every piece of evidence we'd gathered. Hours later, Vera replied with only 3 words. Do your worst. I leaned back in my chair, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Oh, I whispered into the quiet of my apartment. I will. The morning after I sent that last email, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat down to check my bank account. It was supposed to be a routine task, nothing more than glancing at balances and maybe moving a little to savings. But something didn't add up. One of the totals was lower, much lower. I clicked into the transaction history. My breath slowed as I scrolled. Transfer to Langford Holdings LLC, $11,200. I blinked, leaned closer, read it again. The timestamp showed the withdrawal happened the day after my last confrontation with Vera. Another transfer followed 2 days later, $3,800. Then another, and another. The trail was right there in black and white, each transaction chipping away at my savings, the money I'd worked years to build. All initiated using the same login I used when Vera helped manage some billing years ago. I sat back, stunned. Not by the theft itself, but by how casual it was. They weren't just erasing my name from a store. They were pulling money from my own accounts, like I was nothing more than an obstacle to work around. I reached for my phone before I let my anger boil. The call connected on the 3rd ring. Cece, Vera answered with that tone she always used when she thought she was smarter than everyone else, like a smug smirk hiding behind words. I was wondering when you'd call. There's money missing from my account, I said, keeping my voice flat. Over $15,000. You're welcome, she said sweetly. It's all going toward the business. Family legacy, remember? This isn't business, Vera. This is theft. In the background, I heard Dorian laugh. Let her call it whatever she wants. Let her write another blog post. We'll see who people believe. I already know, I said, and ended the call. By noon, I was sitting across from Marcus again, this time with a printout of my transaction history and a police report number scribbled on a notepad. He read through the paperwork silently, jaw clenched. I'm adding financial fraud to the complaint, he said, setting his pen down. They've crossed a different line now. We moved fast. My accounts were frozen. My passwords changed. Dorian and Vera were served an official notice of litigation with the added charges. There was no more asking. There was only doing. Later that afternoon, I posted a photo. It was an old snapshot, one of me standing in front of the store the day I opened it, holding a ribbon-cutting pair of scissors, surrounded by friends, not family. The caption was simple: built by hand, stolen by family, reclaimed in court. By morning, it had gone viral. Messages started pouring in from other business owners. People I hadn't spoken to in years sent texts, shared stories, offered their support. A woman from a neighboring town wrote, "My sister did the same to me. Thank you for saying it out loud." Even the local Chamber of Commerce reposted it with a note: "We stand with founders who protect what they build." Within days, the ripple spread wider. A small podcast picked up the story, then a business blog, then a legal page for women in entrepreneurship. Brand deals that once lined Vera's pockets began disappearing quietly, one by one. And that's when my phone rang again, this time from Isolde. I almost didn't answer. But something in me needed to hear what lie she'd try to spin this time. When I picked up, her voice was already strained. "You need to stop this, Cecilia. You're destroying your sister's career. She's hurting." I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch until she spoke again. "You're making it impossible for her to move forward. This is family, not a war." "No," I said quietly, calmly. "She made it a war when she mistook my kindness for weakness. She's not hurting because of me. She's hurting because the truth doesn't bend to her image." Isolde didn't reply. The call ended without goodbye. The next day, I received an email from a producer at the local news station. They wanted to feature the story on their weekly business segment. I agreed, under one condition. I want to film it in the building they stole from me. There was a pause on the other end. Then, "We can make that happen." I stood outside the store 2 days later, cameras rolling as I walked along the sidewalk I once swept clean every morning. I looked at the windows, now lined with someone else's branding, and smiled, not with bitterness, but with certainty. To the camera, I spoke slowly, carefully. "I started with nothing but a name and a dream. They tried to make both disappear. But when you've built something with your own hands, you don't walk away just because someone changes the sign. You fight, quietly, smartly, but you fight." I turned to face the door. "If they wanted to erase me in silence," I said, "they should have been quieter." I didn't wait long after the interview. The producer messaged me the next morning, said they'd edited it into a tight 3-minute segment. By the afternoon, it was live. The clip opened with me standing in front of the building that used to carry my name. The sign above had changed. The windows bore someone else's branding now, but the bones of that place? They were still mine. I watched myself on screen say the words I'd repeated in my head for months. My name isn't on the window anymore, but everything inside those walls came from me, including the silence that let them take it. I didn't shout, I didn't accuse, I just spoke plainly, and somehow that struck harder than any yelling ever could. By sunset, the views were climbing into the tens of thousands. Comments flooded in, some from locals who remembered the shop before the rebrand, others from strangers who said the story reminded them of something they'd lost to people they once trusted. Someone even commented, "She said it with her whole chest but never raised her voice. That's how you burn down a lie, with facts." 2 hours later, Vera's video dropped. She was sitting in her living room, camera angled just enough to catch the fireplace in the background. Her voice trembled on cue. "I don't know why my sister's doing this," she said, lips pressed into a tight line. "We're family. We could have handled this privately." The comments started out predictable, supportive, sympathetic, but then the shift began. Slowly at first. One person wrote, "Then why is your name on a store she built?" Another chimed in, "Family doesn't need lawyers when they're honest." It spiraled from there. Someone linked to the court docket. Another shared a screenshot of the cease and desist I'd filed. By midnight, the video had more downvotes than likes. Dorian tried to salvage their image by appearing on a podcast the next day. I didn't watch it live, but word spread quickly. Halfway through the episode, the host pulled out copies of the original deed, asked him point blank, "Why does this document say Cecilia Cross was the sole founder and owner?" Dorian stammered, offered a weak laugh, and said something about internal restructuring. The episode was pulled from Spotify by the next morning. All major partnerships Vera had been touting began freezing or quietly cutting ties. The brand that had used my name, my words, my work to prop itself up was cracking under the weight of actual truth. But even with the public backlash, the personal cuts hurt more. A voicemail landed in my inbox late one evening. It was from my mother. I sat on the edge of my bed before pressing play, something tight and sour settling in my stomach. Her voice was softer than I expected. Shaky, vulnerable in a way I hadn't heard in years. "I just wanted everyone to be okay," she said. I didn't mean for it to go this far." She didn't say my name, she didn't apologize, but she sounded tired, like the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders instead of mine. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. 2 days later, Marcus called. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "What now?" I said, bracing myself. "Isolde was hospitalized this morning. Stress-induced collapse. Nothing life-threatening, but it's serious." I sat with that news for a long time. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't send flowers. I didn't tell anyone to check in on her. But that night, I didn't sleep. Not from guilt, but from the ache of how far things had fallen. The next morning, I met Marcus at the courthouse. It was time to file the final litigation. We'd already outlined identity theft, IP theft, financial fraud. Now, it was official. The court date came quickly, quicker than I expected. I arrived early, dressed in navy, hair pulled back, documents organized in a folder I'd triple-checked the night before. I sat alone in the waiting area. No dramatic music, no movie moment, just the rustle of paper, the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Vera and Dorian arrived 15 minutes late. No legal counsel, no briefcase, just matching grim expressions and that silent entitlement I knew too well. When the judge entered, she didn't waste time. "Let's start with who owns what," she said, flipping open the file. And just like that, we were in it. I kept my voice measured, calm. I laid out timelines, showed original documents, handed over verified transactions. Marcus spoke sparingly, only when needed. We didn't dramatize. We just presented. Vera's response was disorganized at best. She rambled. Claimed misunderstandings and collaborative ownership. Dorian tried to interject once and was silenced by the judge's sharp glance. After reviewing the documents, the judge tapped her pen against the desk and said, "Based on the evidence, this court grants a temporary restraining order. Vera Langford and Dorian Haynes are not to access, manage, or interfere with the property known as Root Rise until the case is fully resolved." The bailiff handed over copies of the ruling. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I gathered my papers, stood, and walked out of that room like I'd never been broken in the first place. Outside the courthouse, I stopped across the street from the store. It looked quiet from that angle, almost peaceful. And I said to no one in particular, they tried to replace me with a name. Let's see how far a name goes without a spine. There are victories you celebrate with champagne and a crowd. Then there are the ones you meet with silence because you've already bled enough on the way there. The morning of the final hearing, I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. Downtown Asheville was just starting to wake up. Storefronts pulling up metal gates, delivery trucks nudging into tight alleyways. I walked through the revolving glass doors and into the chilled corridor of the civil courthouse, a folder tucked under my arm. Inside the courtroom, Vera and Dorian sat at the defense table. She looked tired. He looked furious. Isolde sat in the back row, her posture rigid but her face pale. She didn't acknowledge me when I entered, but she didn't look away either. I took my seat alone. Marcus wasn't needed that morning. We'd filed everything in advance, and I was more than capable of sitting upright without someone holding my hand. When the judge entered, the room stilled. I kept my eyes on her, not on the two people I once called family sitting to my right. She flipped through the papers briefly before speaking. In the matter of Cross vs. Langford and Haynes, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Cecilia Cross. A beat. No gasps, no outbursts, just those few words that rewrote the last year of my life. She continued. All rights to intellectual property, trademarks, and business ownership of Root Rise are restored to Ms. Cross. Defendants are ordered to pay damages totaling $47,500 and issue a formal public apology within 30 days. She looked at them. Additionally, a restraining order is granted. You are not to come within 500 feet of Ms. B. Cross or the business premises. Dorian grunted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Vera blinked rapidly, her mouth slightly parted, as if the words hadn't registered. I stood slowly, gathered my folder, and walked past them. No nod, no smug glance, just the sound of my heels on tile as I moved toward the exit. Outside, the morning sun hit the pavement. Reporters were gathered at the base of the stairs, cameras ready. Dorian rushed past me and started yelling into one of them. They think they won because they cry louder, he barked. But it's all politics. One-sided. No one stopped him. No one interrupted. Vera trailed behind him, shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed red. For a second, she looked like the sister I once knew, before ambition ate through everything soft in her. As I passed by Isolde, she reached out and lightly touched my sleeve. I paused. I didn't want this, she whispered, barely audible. I didn't know how to let the world see you without me in the frame. I didn't flinch. I didn't win to punish you, I said quietly. I won to stop you. Then I walked away. The next morning, I arrived in front of the building once again, this time with a locksmith and a new sign. The old letters had already been pulled down, the wall scraped clean. My hands didn't shake as the new lettering went up. Crossroot, founded, lost, reclaimed. There was no fanfare, no ribbon cutting, just a calm breath in my chest and the weight of keys returning to their rightful place. The first customer through the door was Mr. Whitman, the retired teacher who once wrote me that letter during the worst part of it all. He looked around the room, nodded once, and said, "Glad you're back where you belong." I didn't tear up. I didn't need to. We reopened not with music or speeches, but with quiet shelves, steady stock, and no lies. I kept the space smaller. I rehired only the ones who'd waited out the chaos. We went back to basics, and the basics were mine. A few weeks in, a courier arrived just before closing. No name on the label. Inside was a wooden box, neatly tied twine. No note, just an envelope tucked into the corner, sealed. It was from Isolde. I debated for a full 5 minutes before opening it. Inside, in handwriting I'd known since childhood, was a single page. I was wrong. You were right. I just didn't know how to step aside. Not after everything I gave up for this family. I thought I had to be the center of it, even when you became stronger than me. You earned this, but I don't know how to let go without becoming invisible myself. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer of the back office, and locked it without another thought. That same evening, Marcus delivered the paperwork confirming the permanent restraining order. Vera and Dorian were now legally barred from approaching me or setting foot near the property. There would be no more meetings, no more warnings, no more spin. That night, long after closing, I dimmed the lights and walked the store alone. I stopped at the back wall, where a framed photo of my father now hung. In the picture, he stood in front of my first pop-up stand, grinning proudly, sun on his face. I lit a candle beneath it and whispered, "It's finally ours again." I turned, walked toward the front, and locked the door behind me. Some victories don't need applause, just the sound of a lock clicking shut, behind you. The lock clicked shut behind me, sealing more than just a storefront. It sealed a chapter, a scar, a story that was no longer being rewritten by someone else's hand. It had been 3 weeks since the ruling, 3 weeks of learning to breathe again in a space that, for the first time in a long time, wasn't haunted by what had been taken, but grounded in what I'd reclaimed. Not just legally, soul deep. I stopped watching headlines. I stopped explaining myself to people who had already made up their minds. I stopped offering context to strangers more interested in scandal than truth. I just worked. Every morning followed a rhythm now. I'd arrive before the sun had fully risen, unlock the door with steady fingers, and slip into the quiet hush of a space that knew me, that I had shaped, that I had bled for. The first thing I did each morning was light the small candle that sat beneath my father's photo in the back room. Nothing grand, no altar, just a small flame under a picture of the man who once told me, "Build something that speaks for you when you're too tired to explain." The scent of coffee would follow soon after, the beans grinding, the first pot brewing, the air filling with something warm and forgiving. My hands didn't shake anymore. Not because I'd stopped being angry, I hadn't. But the fear was gone, evaporated like steam off a just-poured cup. I no longer braced for the phone call or the letter laced with implied threats. I didn't wait for whispers to start again. I didn't look over my shoulder. The silence wasn't ominous anymore. It was earned. I used to think forgiveness meant sitting across from the person who broke you, that it required eye contact and apology, that it looked like a family dinner or a side hug at a reunion. I don't believe that anymore. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about hugging the wound. It's about choosing not to carry it into your future like luggage someone else packed. It's walking lighter because you finally let go of what wasn't yours to hold. So I let it go. The weight, the shame, the secondhand guilt they tried to staple to my back like a name tag I never asked for. The shop was smaller now, tighter, more deliberate. I cut the fluff. No branded hashtags, no influencer endorsements, no manicured launch parties. Just good coffee, real conversation, and the regulars, some of whom had been there before the rebrand, before the collapse, before the lawsuit. Others had come later, quietly, after someone whispered, "She's the one who built it." Not the face they showed you. One Thursday afternoon, I got an email from a woman organizing a local entrepreneurship panel for women in business. "We'd love to have you speak," it read. "We're saving the last spot for someone who's walked through fire and came out honest." I almost deleted it. The thought of standing in front of strangers again, being the story instead of telling it, made my stomach lurch. But something in that last line caught me. I replied simply, "I'll speak, but only if I can go last." A few days later, another envelope arrived at the store. The handwriting on the front stopped me. Vera. Inside was a letter written in her usual tight, precise cursive. Even on paper, she was trying to control the narrative, trying to look composed even now. "I lost everything," it began. "Maybe I deserved it. Maybe not. But I hope you never feel what it's like to be hated for who you tried to be. I never hated you, Cecilia. I just wanted to be noticed like you were. And when people didn't, I thought taking it would make it mine. But it never felt real. I hope you find peace. I don't think I will." I folded it once, slid it between two books in the office, didn't burn it, didn't reread it. She wanted to be seen, so did I. But only one of us built something worth looking at. That Saturday, I visited the assisted living center where Isolde now stayed. She'd had a minor stroke shortly after the verdict, nothing life-threatening, but enough to slow her. The nurse greeted me at the door, nodded without asking why I was there. Isolde sat by the window, sunlight haloing her silver hair. Her robe was pale blue. Her hands rested in her lap, still and deliberate. She looked like someone who'd been preparing for company she wasn't sure would come. I brought her a jar of strawberry jam. The label still bore the old design, handwritten font, a small illustration of a spoon. She turned it in her hands for what felt like minutes before finally lifting her eyes. "You really did make something," she said. I nodded. Said nothing. I didn't hug her when I left. Not out of resentment, but because some distances stay sacred after too many betrayals. That evening, I closed up early. Not because I was tired, just because I wanted something simpler than the daily churn. I met Eliza and June, two of my former employees, for dinner at a roadside diner just outside town. They were already seated when I arrived, halfway through a plate of sweet potato fries. We didn't talk about the store, or Vera, or lawyers. We talked about everything and nothing, and it was enough. After dessert, cherry pie and strong black coffee, I stood up and tapped the side of my glass. "You were there when it broke," I said, voice even. "And you're here while I rebuild. That makes you family, if you want the title." They didn't cry. Neither did I. We just raised our glasses. No clinking. Just held eye contact. 3 women. Whole again. No longer trying to survive each other. Just surviving with each other. Later, I walked to my car beneath a velvet sky stitched with stars. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I didn't win back what I lost. I built something better. After they showed me what I'd never accept again. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are with the people who raised us. This story isn't just about a stolen business. It's about reclaiming your worth when those closest to you try to write you out of your own legacy. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Like your silence was mistaken for surrender? Let me know in the comments. Your story might help someone else find the strength to speak up. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life family stories that reveal the quiet battles, the loud betrayals, and the resilience it takes to rise above them.